Final buzzer of the game. You're losing 6-rip, and I turn around just in time to see the wobble.
Oh, no.
Broke my nose, took my front tooth. So, yeah, sometimes my wife and mom would argue I love it a little too much.
Yeah.
We wear a cage now, by the way.
I'm sure it was like a Friday or Saturday. It feels like they always lose a tooth on a Friday or Saturday.
Okay.
Dentist isn't open till Monday.
Oh, so you
just gotta wait. The nerve pain.
Bolts Nation, welcome back to the Block Party, powered by our friends Highlight IPA. I am your host, Greg Wolf, joined by my cohort, Braydon Coburn, and we are excited to welcome in another new guest who has joined us here on the block. Ben Pierce is here with us. You know who this guy is?
You got to get to know everybody.
You got to get to know everybody. Exciting. Do you know who he is? Before today, did you really know who he was?
I knew who he was because I've been reading his stuff, and but it's good to put a face to the
tweets.
Yeah. Something. Yeah.
So Ben, what is your official title here now?
Manager of Media Relations and Team Beat Writer.
So you basically took over for Chris
Krenner. Oh, big shoes, by the way.
Those are huge shoes to fill. So I'm curious how.
So Krenner, if he goes by Krenner, are you Piercer or what's the?
They're still trying to decide that. You know, there's been some references to the old TV show MASH. You know, I think Hawkeye's floating around there maybe as a potential name. Which I've got a horrendous story. I've got a scary story for that one, for the nickname.
Why Hawkeye? Yeah, give it to us.
So
now.
MASH, there's a character whose name is
Hawkeye. It's the with the glasses, right?
Right. Yeah. And so his name is Ben. That's my name.
Is it Ben Pierce on the show?
Yeah. Right.
Oh, well, then that makes sense.
And did you know that before?
No.
You watched the show? Because I think
so. It's a little before my time.
Yeah, I was gonna say MASH is like not.
That's old school, bro.
So here's the thing, though, is like when I was in high school, there was a substitute teacher who was, ancient, right? A pretty old guy. And he'd walk in, and the only thing he'd do the roll call, make sure everybody was in their seat. You know, a guy doesn't want to get in trouble for missing half the class somewhere, and so he'd do the roll call. And the first time that he was our sub, he's doing roll call. He's going through, like Abby Smith, Tori, whatever. Right. And then he says, Hawkeye. And everybody's looking around like, we're all 14 years old. It's 2012.
Right.
Like, we're looking at each other like, what is going on here? And he goes, you're telling me nobody knows who Hawkeye is? And he's looking at me. He goes, Ben Pierce. And I'm like, yeah. And I didn't really understand it, whatever. And it was all a big fun joke. Now, before I joined the Lightning, I was a newspaper reporter.
Okay.
When I worked in Wisconsin as a reporter for the daily newspaper, one day my phone rang, and it was an anonymous number. And it's technology these days. You can screen, and it's anonymous. I'm thinking, like, no shot I pick up this call. I'm like, it's going to be some weird robot. Something's going on. So I don't pick up. Calls immediately after recall, anonymous. And I'm like, okay, something. And I'm an education reporter covering schools. So I'm like, maybe it's like some weird filter for a high school, what's going on. So I pick it up. And this guy is talking like a million miles an hour. And he's like, just so you know, there's something going on. You got to go right now. You got to go right now. And he goes, you can't know my name, but you got to look into this. He said, I'm going to call you back in 2 minutes. I'm going to ring once, and then I'm going to hang up, and you got to pick it up again. What? And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking around the office. I'm like, somebody is playing a break. Something's going on here, right? They're like, young, here we go. Nobody, and like everybody's looking at me like, what the hell is this kid's problem? Like, what? Like,
wow.
Like, buddy, welcome to the bigs. Like, what's going on here? And so then it rings once. I pick it up. I'm not really thinking. Pick up. Line cuts. I'm like, okay. So he calls me back, and he's like, I need to know if I can trust you before I tell you who I am. And he goes, now listen. He goes, you're Hawkeye. He goes, and you can't know my name yet, but I'm Radar. He goes, we're going to get to know each other really, really well. And Radar is from MASH.
Yes.
So, long story short, this all leads into, like, he'll call me every once in a while, give me, like, these weird stories. Like, he's like, you should look into so-and-so. The best story that Radar ever gave me was there was a teacher at the school who was nearing retirement. He left his job, and it was, like, really kind of hush-hush. And it turned out that this man was going number 2 in a public park and smearing it on the side of a building to, quote, stick it to the man.
Oh, my God.
The craziest story I've ever written.
And you got this from MASH?
And it came from Radar.
From Radar.
Radar.
Yeah,
and so, he's telling me this, and I'm like, okay, something's not right here. And you put in the records requests, all this stuff is coming together. This story blew up. It was in the New York Times,
wow.
Because you don't ever hear about that.
No.
And like the police report even, and like, It was crazy, but it all came to radar. So for the history of my newspaper career, everybody, it was Hawkeye. So we'll see if that sticks here in Tampa. But yeah,
I mean,
so when they come in and they're like, we want to know what your source is. How did you break this story? You just got to be like, I got this story.
I've got my sources.
Radar. That's all he has to say.
Yeah, radar. Yeah.
Wow.
So since you got the Tampa, has anybody decided to be your insider story?
No, not yet. Not yet. I haven't found my radar yet.
Give me your phone number.
It's not me.
There we go. Let's go.
So talk to us how that process went. I mean, obviously to fill the role of Chris Krenn. Did you what was that process like? How did they, because obviously they narrowed it down to just a handful of candidates, but talk to us, was that an interview with Krenn or was that an interview with Breesman? How did that whole process work to become our beat writer?
Yeah, I kind of joked and told these guys it was the gauntlet a little bit, I had my initial screening with HR just to see if the qualifications match up, things went well. And I gave them a hard time because I actually got a no the first time.
They just said you're not qualified?
No, they said you're a great fit. We're going to go with a different candidate who's got NHL experience. And I'm like, you know what? When I first got that first interview with an NHL team, I was like, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened in my entire life.
Sure.
I was just so cool to even have the conversation. I said, thanks. And I just sent a follow-up saying, if there's, any suggestions you have, this is where I want to be.
Yep.
If there's anything. A couple of weeks went by and they reached back out and said, hey, first candidate didn't work out. If you're still interested. And I was like, reply instantly, absolutely, let's make it happen. So came back, did another Zoom interview with Krenner, and that went well. Kind of waited a little bit, and then it was obviously the season's sneaking up here. I think it was August, and it was we're hoping preseason's going on, and we'll see if we can't fly you down here if it's a good fit. Came down, met Breezer and Gabby Shirley, great TV reporter, and kind of went through some of that. And I think there was 3 different interviews. There was 2 panels and 1 solo with Breeze. So it was a long day. It was a matter of 24 hours. We were in and out, and I went back to Wisconsin, and they called and offered me the job. And that day it was second best day of my life. So we got married, so I'll give her that one.
Okay.
But second best day of my life.
That's amazing. So the journey, I mean, obviously we don't know the Ben Pierce backstory. So tell us, where your love for sports or hockey came into play, how you got into writing, where you went to school. Give us the whole story.
Yeah, Wisconsin guy. You had to have been a hockey guy along the way.
Sure.
So here, the rink that I grew up playing in was an old pole shed. And in the summers, it was the community complex.
Okay.
In the winter, it had these big, huge sliding garage doors. You'd slide them down, and they'd flood the rink, and it was the ice rink.
Love it.
And we called it the Meat Locker was the name. So I grew up playing in the Meat Locker.
Natural ice?
What's that?
Natural ice?
So it was fantastic, and it was cold. It's Wisconsin. It was freezing ass cold in this rink.
Right.
And so everybody else hated it. The roof of this rink was 20 feet high. It was
super.
Your typical rural rink.
Yeah,
it was a meat locker.
For real.
But for us, there were spots in the boards where if you rung it around the boards just right, that puck's kicking straight to the slot. So we had little set plays based on our nice little. Everybody else hated it, and we just loved it. Our when the high school team, because we were a co-op, and when I was in the middle of my high school career, my sophomore year, they gave it back to West Salem for the first time in 40 years.
Wow.
And our locker rooms, because it was such a quick turnaround, we took old mobile homes, gutted them, renovated them. They were unreal. They were super cool, but you're getting dressed in a mobile home.
Resourceful.
And it was super cool. The old bedroom was the coach's office in the back. But it was so cool growing up. And the nice thing about a community like that is it's a small community.
Yeah.
On a Saturday at 7 a.m. we'd wake up and our dads would drive us down to the rink, and our dads would open the Zamboni door. They'd go out and zam the ice for us. We'd spend 12 hours a day there on the weekends skating, playing, and kind of related to that. When we were in high school, my brother and I, Zach, we would go down and have our own little morning skate every once in a while. It's 5 a.m. You're waking up, going down and do what you love before you got to sit in a classroom all day.
Sure.
It's a small town. They love hockey, and one of the guys that we grew up playing with was drafted and went on to play with the Wisconsin Badgers. So hockey was a big part of our community. We love it. It's been a big part of my life. And on the writing side, it got to a point where, obviously I wasn't going to make the NHL. It probably took way too many PIMs to even give it a chance. So don't look up the high school stats. Way too much time in the box. Sorry, coach.
That's what happens when you play in a small rink. You get these confrontational guys.
Absolutely. So, but the writing side of it was like, what better way to keep my passion for hockey than to find a way to cover it? You know, I wanted to stay involved with the game, so did some broadcasting of some junior hockey, different stuff like that. Was doing some write-ups, and then I wanted to be an English teacher because originally the plan was, you know, I want to be involved with words, but my high school coaches, Bob Monroe and Eric Borey, both of them, they instilled just such a strong connection with me, and you know, it felt like they were the first people hockey-wise that, you know, they saw something in me, and I wanted to be able to give that back. So I was going to be a high school English teacher and coach some hockey on the side. And then the journalism thing kind of took me by surprise. My senior year of high school, I was taking the high school media class, honestly, because I was decent at writing, and I thought it'd be an easy credit senior year. Let's go. But I really fell in love with it. So got into that. Everything was going well, and
were you just covering sports for journalism?
So it was everything. It was news, sports, and then
but hockey was your first love, like
yeah,
that
it was. It still is. You know, it's like you know, growing up, it's just whether it's watching, writing, playing. You know, my 2 front teeth are fake. Lost a battle with a concrete driveway at 12 years old. And decided to play a men's league, beer league hockey tournament without a face mask on a couple years ago. Took a deflected puck. We were down 6-0, by the way.
Okay.
Final buzzer of the game. You're losing 6-rip, and I turn around just in time to see the wobble.
Oh, no.
Broke my nose, took my front tooth. So, yeah, sometimes my wife and mom would argue I love it a little too much. We wear a cage now, by the way.
I'm sure it was like a Friday or Saturday. It feels like they always lose a tooth on a Friday or Saturday. Okay. Dentist isn't open till Monday.
Oh, so you just
gotta wait. The nerve pain, like.
Well, and the worst part was you're waking up Sunday morning to go play in this, you know, just random men's league tournament fundraiser, and we're playing at 8 a.m. the next morning, and I wake up in this hotel room, and I wake up and go to take a breath in, and I'm breathing out my mouth, like the nose, it wasn't working, and I'm like, oh man, and I get home, and there's still pictures out there somewhere of me with, you know, you got the double stuffed nose. There's blood, and I'm smiling with a beer in my hand. You know, like, let's go, boys. Like,
rite of passage.
Yeah. So the hockey. Yeah, you could argue the love is a little too deep, but no, it's been a big part of my life, and being able to kind of share my 2 biggest passions of hockey and writing here in Tampa Bay, it's truly my dream come true.
So where did you go to college?
So I went to UW Whitewater.
Okay.
So it's kind of between Madison and Milwaukee.
Okay. Small school.
It's a UW system school, so it is one of like the 6 biggest in Wisconsin.
Okay.
But they have a really esteemed journalism program, so it was kind of a good spot for me. And the nice part about that was there's a junior hockey team in town in the NAHL, North American Hockey League.
Okay.
The Janesville Jets. So it was kind of a way. It wasn't a D1 school that I could cover, but it was hockey.
Absolutely.
I was working for the student newspaper, and I was working part-time at the daily newspaper, and eventually they hired me on full-time, and the rest is kind of history. Kind of jumped around a little bit in the newspapers, but here we are. So
has it always been like, current events, like you said, NHL is the writing, like the live things, or do you have a passion for other kinds of writing, like creative writing, or do you ever want to write a book? Like, is that in the cards?
You know, like, I've always wanted to write a book. It's just one of those things. I think right now I want to experience a little bit more, and kind of figure it out. Something that's really near and dear to me is depression and mental health.
Okay.
So I think, I want to have an impact, on other people. I want to help other people as much as I can. I've done some youth hockey coaching, which is that's an interesting battle these days.
Okay.
12-year-olds are a little different than when I was 12, 10 years ago. I will tell you that much right now. But yeah, I think I really enjoy telling the stories that otherwise wouldn't be told, even
That's
just
great.
like now being in the Tampa Bay locker room, and, you're talking to a guy like Mitchell Chafee, and I had a story a couple weeks ago playing the Minnesota Wild, and he kind of said, like, they gave me my first chance, but here in Tampa Bay, like, this is kind of my chance to show them what they're missing out on. And like that moment talking to him, it was like,
that's the real stuff.
It's so cool, like you could tell like it means a lot to them, and
and that gets you pumped up too. Like you're like,
I love it.
I mean, like he lights up,
like even today talking to Luke Glendening, and like first off, the guy's got a smile kind of like mine, so I appreciate the no teeth. So I think that helps a little bit, but like for that guy to play 800 NHL games,
just hit it
as a bottom 6 guy, and it's like, what do you enjoy doing? And it's like he said, being here,
right?
Like just. You could tell he loves it so much, and to just see like these guys are obviously making good money. They've been in the league for a long time, and they love it so much. Like they share the same passion I do, and I think that's so cool. So that's the best part of this.
And you got a taste of your own dose of Florida because you moved down here for the position during the hurricane. Like, what a welcome that must have been for you.
My first day at Amalie Arena, I walk in, and it's a ghost town. Like, it was me, Breezer was here, and there was like 2 other people, and it was an initiation. So, and it's one of those things you're kind of looking and planning for the trip down, and everybody's saying like, well, don't worry. Like Tampa, you're protected.
Right.
You don't have to worry about the, major hurricane. It hasn't happened in 100 years. You're good. You're way good. And all of a sudden I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the projections and I'm in an apartment, like they're still setting up the internet. And I'm like, I don't know about
Were you
this.
on the first floor?
So we're luckily on the 3rd floor.
Okay.
So we're up there, but it's like, again, I'm from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I can do snowstorms. I've seen a couple tornadoes. I'm like, I've never done the hurricane thing, right? Like, I'm like, am I going to be good? Like, do I need to so then, of course, you go to like stock up.
Yes. Nothing's available.
There's nothing out there. You get a couple of like the freezer packs, but I'm like, I don't know what to expect. And
baptism
of course,
by fire. Like,
well,
literally.
I said, I'm like, we talked about the nickname thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're going to start calling me like Hurricane Ben or something. Like, I show up in my first week, they see a path they haven't seen in 100 years. Like, give me a break, man.
This kid from Wisconsin, it's his fault.
So I'm like, they might not let me back in here. I might be bad luck. So,
wow.
But I will say, too, that part of it, we have a family friend that lives down here. And so they let me stay with them for the hurricane just to kind of see what it was like. And,
sure.
Seeing what happened after that hurricane, the response and just the collective ability of a community to kind of come together. I'd been living here for 48 hours, 72 hours, and all of a sudden I'm pulling, the wind guards off of people's windows and, taking down these metal shutters and just seeing like all these people pouring out to go help their elderly neighbors or people who have, physical disabilities that can't do it themselves. I think it was a really cool kind of welcome moment for me to see like, you're not at home, but it was good to see right away that people take care of each other. And then obviously the incredible donations by the ownership here. It was a really cool thing to see firsthand. So,
I mean, this is a very big community, but it's a small community when it comes to that. We're a very tight-knit community, a military community, obviously Military Appreciation Week here. But what have you, obviously now that you've kind of grounded yourself here in Tampa, and now you've kind of immersed yourself here in the Lightning organization, as they say, what have you learned most about this team? Obviously, the season's kind of just started, but in the short time you've been covering it, what have you learned most about this team?
I think for me, first off, as a journalist, you're learning who gives the best sound bites. So shout out to Nick Paul. I think he might be the early favorite. Obviously, Hetty's up there too, but
for sure.
Nick Paul is very good at that. So he gives some pretty good quotes. But I think for me, as far as this Lightning group, I mean, it was a crazy offseason for them, and to see when I walked in on day one, I wasn't sure what the mentality was going to be like, how everybody was adjusting. But, anytime you lose your captain, you never really know what's going to happen. And first off, Hetty, you'd think this guy's been a captain for 10 years, the way that he's led this team and even with some of the media stuff. I know those guys don't always love that part of it, but he's been really, really good with that. So, I think just seeing his leadership, I think any NHL team would be lucky to have him. I think there's probably 31 other ones that would love to have him.
Of course,
but just to see his leadership, and then also too, like the thing for me is when you come in working for like a local newspaper that doesn't have like that big league team, an NHL, the Major Four, Core Sports, you're not really sure what to expect working with some of these professional athletes. And I think my biggest takeaway so far has been like they're human beings, right? And I think just the amount of respect and they're true pros in everything they do. So, like give each other a hard time every once in a while with the cliches, the hockey cliches sometimes over the, when you're hoping for a good soundbite. But it just seems like a great room. And everybody that I've talked to has said like it's the best room that I've been around in the media side of things. It's my first NHL dressing room, so I can't comment on that part of it. But I think it's just they seem like a great group of guys, and you can tell that obviously a crazy summer, but they're kind of building something here, and it's exciting to see what they can do now. So
Ben, it's a professional relationship, but I think more you are able to get guys to understand you, and you can build that relationship. How do you go about building as a new guy coming in? No different than maybe a new guy in the dressing room, but now you're expecting guys to kind of open up to you and talk to you. How do you kind of foster that relationship with them? I've always kind of been interested because there's certain guys, when I was playing that you were like, I'm only going to give them about, the end of my finger.
Right.
Other guys, they can trust, you can trust them to kind of convey your story or get your message out there. How do you kind of play that tiptoe, that kind of relationship?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to something I said originally was just like the human side of it, and just get like, especially for me working for the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think it's, my job isn't to have some crazy, awesome story that breaks this crazy news about the Lightning. I'm just trying to share those stories about this team and what makes this group special. And I think the biggest thing when you're trying to foster those relationships is you got to prove that they can trust you, right? So it might take a couple interviews, and it might take, your story goes out there, and they can see what you've done with what they said. Because if you give me a quote right now and you give a quote to somebody, the same quote 10 minutes from now to somebody else, it might be portrayed differently, right?
Sure.
Depending on how that's written. So I think it's just showing like my intentions are pure, and I think sometimes that's difficult because you want to tell a good story, but it's not my story to tell, right? I'm trying to share these guys' stories, and I want it to be about them and what's happening. Because if I'm a fan sitting at home, they don't care what I do or they want to know what these NHL guys that they wouldn't otherwise have these stories. They want to know what they're up to. So I think just going into it, realizing that it is about them and sharing their stories, and just allowing those guys to see, like, I'm here to tell your story, and I'm not here to tell my version of your story.
Right. There's a lot of emotion to it too. And I know you just started covering this team, but you've been covering sports for a while.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any situations where someone approaches you and is angry about kind of how they were portrayed per se? Like I feel like that would be something that, would definitely happen.
Yeah, well, you can thank Radar for that first experience there. But I think with that too, like, the nice thing when somebody is upset is it's kind of a reminder of just how much this work matters. Mm-hmm. And as long as you can say, like, as long as you can work those things out with whoever's upset about something you wrote or something you did, and say, like, there has to be mutual respect of, you have a job to do, I have a job to do. And I am never going to make somebody look bad just because I think it'll be a good story. But at the same time, like when I'm working in education or public policy, writing stories about city council decisions, things that impact taxpayers, like I don't work for the city council. I work for the people that are affected by decisions the city council makes. And I think it's just kind of balance that line of, I'm never out to make somebody look bad, but I also want to make sure that what I'm sharing is the true essential information coming from those things.
Call a spade a spade, right?
And I think too, some of the best people I've ever worked with on the other side of it, whether they're the PR person or there's like a direct source, is just having that understanding of, you might not like what I write, but I hope that you can respect that what I write is the truth.
Right. So what about if there's a circumstance where it's an egregious mistake, a terrible turnover? As a writer, how do you kind of convey that message about kind of like how boneheaded this play was
without saying it was a boneheaded play?
Making that guy feel and feel like a bonehead.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing, especially at the NHL level, is so often, if they make a boneheaded play, they know they made a boneheaded play, right? So I think even when you ask the question, instead of saying, hey, great pass there, bud. Like, you're like, take me through what you saw on that play, or what were you thinking? Like, just tell me what you were trying to accomplish or what you thought you saw, instead of just like, what were you thinking? What did you see that? A lot of it is tone, right? It's how you ask the question.
Sure.
And I think too, when you're writing, you can write, the opposing team scored after a Lightning turnover instead of, the opposing team scored because X player made the worst play of the 24-25 season, right? I think like that, and part of that is that respect. It's like,
unless you're writing in Philly, then
you know what, Philly does have that reputation, but it also does help too. Like for me on the team side of things, my job isn't to make any of these guys look bad. It's to make sure fans know what's going on, and I guarantee you that if there's a fan who's watching the game, fans, part of the reason that this game is what it is because the fans care so much. They know who made the play
For sure.
9 times out of 10, right? So if I'm writing a story and I say after Lightning turnover, I would guess 9 out of 10 of them.
They know exactly.
They'll tell you the time of the play, what the score was, and who made the bad play.
100%.
So I don't need to tell them. There's a way to go about it without throwing some of these guys under the bus, and I think that's just part of,
Yeah.
So that kind of ties in what my question was about social media. And in your opinion, how do you feel that social media has changed the landscape of the sports media business and connecting with audiences, fans, and coaches, staffs, and players?
Yeah. Well, for me, like growing up, I'm 27. So when I was in middle school, high school, it's kind of when all this stuff blew up.
Correct.
I remember like when Facebook took off, it was crazy, right? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I'm old enough to remember MySpace.
Yep.
Like that was a big thing
Huge.
before Facebook.
Correct.
And then Twitter obviously took off, and then it was Instagram, and you're seeing some of like the video TikTok stuff like that. I think my journey of seeing what it was to what it is now and kind of growing up with it helps to kind of understand how people interact with those things. I think one of the best things that I learned early in my journalism career was don't read the comments.
Facts.
Right? If you're putting out a story, if you're putting out a tweet.
It's no different than being a player. It's no different than playing a player, right?
Yes.
Right. It's as long as you're writing a story and you can say, like, that's my best effort. I submitted the best story I could write. People are going to hate on it no matter what it looks like, no matter how great it is. Somebody out there is going to take issue with it.
Correct.
So you just got to kind of hit publish. And again, as long as you can say, like, this is my best work. And it's the same thing with social media. I mean, I can't tell you how many times my editors out there are probably rolling their eyes saying, this guy's got some typos that were brutal. But like for me too, I think just understanding that, again, we're all human. Like we're talking about the mistakes with the hockey guys. They're going to make mistakes. Right. When I'm writing, I guarantee this season I'm going to make a mistake and I'm going to look back and be like, how did you let that slide? You know? But
we're human.
And again, coming back to it, like the fan reactions, the reason that they're so upset is because they care. And I think just kind of reminding yourself, like, without them, I wouldn't have the job that I do. So you take it with a grain of salt, and I respect that everybody has an opinion, but I do think a big part of it is just letting it go and saying, I'm here to do a job and I'm going to do it to the best that I can every day.
I think when you convey that emotion that's when people like, whether you make a mistake or not, the example that I'm thinking of is like a legend. I'm comparing you to Phil Esposito, but Phil Esposito, when you listen to his broadcast, there's so much emotion and he's invested in it. Is that always, he grammatically correct or on cue? No, but that doesn't matter because it's the message he's conveying. And I think that's the same thing with writing.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, Espo, like one of my first days here, he came up and hadn't met him yet, and he punched me in the arm, and that was my hello to Phil Esposito. And he goes, welcome aboard. And it was such like a moment for me where I'm like, that can't be who I think that is, right? And it's like, it's like, holy, like, wow. But it is just that passion, and again, with the fan side of it, it's like they have a lot of emotion because they care, and that's part of the reason, like, I texted my wife this morning after the media availability today. I'm like, every day I wake up and I can't believe that this is, I call this work.
Yeah.
Like I love what I do. I love that, every day I get out of bed and then there's not a single day where it's like, here we go again. It's on my worst days here, I'm still coming to an NHL rink every day. I'm talking to the NHL guys and sharing stories about the greatest athletes in the world. And
are you on the road too?
There's supposedly a road trip coming up I'll be going with. I don't go every road trip. Because obviously with technology, it makes it a little easier.
Yeah, for sure.
Give the guys their room on the away trips. Gabby goes to all the away games, but
that's cool,
though. I'm looking forward to my first road trip and seeing what stories we can get out of that. But just it's truly the dream, right?
It
I've
really
said that
is.
how many times?
And he's humbled. I love that, man. Go ahead.
So, is there? I guess in the league, I guess maybe not. It was expanded to sports, but at hockey, is there a guy that you're like dying to interview that you're just like, I want to interview that guy so bad? Is there someone that like comes out at you right away?
So my first game was here in Tampa Bay. My first favorite hockey player ever was Marty St. Louis.
Love it.
I loved, I was a little smaller stature growing up, and it's just the guy. I love the fact that he was one of the smallest guys on the ice, but the guy just piss and vinegar all the time.
Yes,
he was not taking any shit. And I love that. That's kind of how I tried to play, and sometimes too much again, whoops. But Marty St. Louis was, I'm looking, especially now as a coach, to see what that transition's been like. That's a guy that I think would be really cool. But
do you let him know that before you
See, I would never let him know before. It might be a thing where, afterwards I would just say I just want you to know, I really respect everything that you've done, and I've been a fan, but you want to keep that professional side of it too. I don't want to gas the guy up and then be like, hey man, here's a question for you now, right? I don't want to skew anything and make him, think that he's got to give me some great answer now that I'm telling him he's one of the best players I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I was a pretty diehard Edmonton Oilers fan growing up.
Okay.
From Wisconsin, really?
Interesting, right? I was going to say.
Because Allie was...
she's Chicago, but she was... Right? Yeah, but she was a Chicago fan.
So we obviously don't have an NHL fan
Wisconsin,
or team.
She was, but she was a Blackhawks fan because it was closest.
So when I was in high school, I was doing some help coaching some youth hockey, and one of the guys who got drafted by the Oilers that year, which, looking back, sorry, Neil Yakupov, you go back and look at him like, this guy's the next Alex Ovechkin, right? A Russian kid, great one time, here we go. And I liked that they had great jerseys. So, in middle school when you're playing, NHL 07, you're like, you gotta go with the team with the great jerseys. I always liked Sam Gagner too, veteran forward. Just, I loved the way he was willing to play any role. And, but when I was in high school, I was helping with some youth coaching, and one of the guys for USA Hockey was talking to me and just asked a little about my background, and he asked me who my favorite player was, and I was wearing number 23 on my jersey at the time, and I told him, there's a guy who plays for the Oilers. His name was Matt Hendricks. He's a longtime NHL vet, played for the Predators as well, and he said, why? And I said, I don't really have a good reason. I said, I like his jersey number. I said, he's a fourth line guy. I don't think there's many... I said, I appreciate what those bottom six guys do.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I just defensively and everything, I appreciate it. And a couple weeks later in the mail, I got a bunch of signed stuff from Matt Hendricks.
Wow.
So the guy with USA Hockey had mentioned it to him, and that pretty much sealed the deal for the Oilers for me.
That's pretty awesome, dude.
General manager of he's in the management with the Wild now, I believe.
Yeah, he is.
Right?
Yeah.
Is it Iowa?
Yep, Iowa.
Yeah. Okay.
And so
he knows everybody.
So the Hendricks thing happened, and then of course, I'm like, this is super cool. It's a guy that had never met me. I was a high school kid, and he was newer to the Oilers organization too. And then a couple weeks later, they go ahead and draft Connor McDavid. So
that was that.
That's not a bad team to be rooting for at the time. So
well, listen, it's been an awesome conversation. Before we get into our hat trick, I did want to touch some on our Lightning programming, because some things have been updated since our last show. Into the Blue with Gabby and Chris no longer, but Into the Blue now is coming back with Ben and Gabby, and it drops on Thursdays.
Episode 2 came out today.
Episode 2 came out today. Episode 3 will drop tomorrow, because this is probably airing next week. So talk to us about Into the Blue. I know Power Lunch is also now on video as well, and the Hall of Fame voting just was announced today too. So I would love for you to touch on that stuff.
Yeah, Into the Blue, it's something that when I got hired, we were kind of like, yeah, we'll get to it. Obviously, the season was kicking up here, so the podcast kind of fell to the wayside a little bit, getting ready for the games. Now that it's up and running, it's a lot of fun. We love doing it, and to work with Gabby with that, she's obviously a seasoned vet, and she's so good at what she does. So that's been a lot of fun, and it's nice too to see the fan interaction. It just gives them another opportunity to learn about the Lightning and stay involved. So we're loving that. We're always looking for questions for the podcast for our segment for that. So if you're looking for that, you can tweet at me or Gabby. But it's fun because it's another opportunity for the fans to just show how much they care, and for us to give them a little bit deeper than just the live updates during the game. As for the Hall of Fame,
yeah, talk to us. Just announced.
That is a tough list.
It is. I only saw. I was driving in when I saw that they dropped the press release, and I saw Rick Peckham was on the list. Jay Feaster was on the list. I don't recall who the others were. If you remember some of them, because I want to give the right information, because it's on our website now. But
yeah, well, I'll tell you right now, there's 2 goalies that are both probably deserving, and Kabi Bulin.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Or Hobby Bulin, sorry. I messed up that.
And Bishop's on there.
And Bish.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and you can only pick 2.
Right.
Ryan Callahan's on that list.
Oh, my gosh.
It is going to be...
Is Kobina on the list? Pavel Kobina on the list? Oh, my goodness.
Kobina's on the list.
Bro.
And there's one more, too. I'm trying to think of who that is. I don't want to leave anybody
Feaster,
out.
I know was on there. Who did I just say before Feaster?
Starts with a B.
said Bishop. We said
Yep.
anyways, it's on the website,
It is
and
on
it's up for them to vote now. And I'm sure Kobe and I will be back to host those festivities and kick it off when we do have our Hall of Fame celebration. So Hall of Fame voting is now live. So please do your part, Bolts Nation, and vote for who you think should be inducted this year. All right, so we need to get into the Hattricks, powered by our friends at Highlight IPA. And like I told you before we started the show, typically these are questions more geared towards coaching, staff, personnel, but we kind of tweaked them for you today.
All right.
So the first question I'm going to ask is, if you were in a NHL fantasy hockey league and it's time for you to make your pick, Lightning member, of course, but Cooch and Vazzy are off the board and Pointer is injured, who are you taking and why?
So a couple players jumped to my mind. Obviously, you got Hetty.
Okay.
Right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
the guy's going to put up 60 to 80 points every single year. You know, he's going to be good in the plus minus, all that stuff too. So Hetty would be a great choice,
okay.
But I'm going to give some love to Brandon Hagel.
Love it. I was hoping you would go to Hags.
I mean,
dude's off
the start that he's had this year, and I think it's one of those guys that when the Lightning made that trade, you know, there was some questions, I think, from outside fans, like, seems like a lot.
Right. Now
he has been worth every penny and more, and I know just talking to him and the guys he's playing with, it's like he gets better somehow. The longer he's been a member of the Lightning, I feel like he just keeps kind of elevating his game. And another guy that I like that, you know, he's really good offensively, but he's not afraid to get into the scrums a little bit. So I'd probably go Hags, and he's putting up the points this year to make the pick worthy too. So we'll go with Hags.
All right, solid pick. There you go.
I don't know where, Wolf, you got these questions for or who you were digging with, but Ben, where did your fear of bugs come from? That feel like that's a deep dive somebody did on you there.
His face was telling it all right there.
Yeah. So, you know, when we lived in Wisconsin, the rule was, you know, my wife would find a big spider or something, and she'd be like, you got to come kill this thing. We moved here to Florida, and the wife was here, and she's still in Wisconsin right now. We're figuring out the living situation long term and the job for her. So she left to go back to Wisconsin to work for a little bit. And when she left, I was walking through the house, and I'm like, something's going on. You know, I'm like, I felt like I could hear something. I'm like, something doesn't seem right. And
oh boy,
I walk into one of the bathrooms at our new apartment, and all I saw was something scurry to the corner. And it was gone, and I'm like, that makes it worse. Like, at least I wish at least I could have seen it and been like, okay, I know it's here somewhere.
Right.
But now I'm thinking, like, now you're in your head, right?
Right.
So then I go to get in bed, and all of a sudden I'm like,
you feel something itch?
I'm like, what is on my leg? You know, the blanket's rubbing just right on my foot. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm like, this is a problem. So I'm sitting there. I'm like, don't worry about it. The next day, I wake up and I walk into the kitchen, and I'm like, okay, not a big deal. I'm like, I should go check that bathroom again. And I walk in the bathroom, and there is my first Florida cockroach.
Probably the size of your hand.
And I did not know cockroaches could get that big. And I don't know if that's like a Midwest thing.
You adopted him as your pet dog now?
Are you sure it wasn't a palmetto bug?
Well, that's what I mean. And so that Gabby's surely right. I was like, you're going to have to like get pictures of this thing and like figure it out. So I'm thinking, you know, like in Wisconsin, like, yeah, it's cold as hell in January, but those things aren't around in January.
Right.
You know, I'm thinking, like, it seems a little late in the year for this, you know? And so talking to the property manager, and they're like, oh, you'll get used to those. I'm like, oh.
No, I won't.
Wow, what a welcome.
Right.
So
hurricanes, palmetto bugs, cockroaches.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're adapting to the bugs, but the wife, and she's been talking to my mom, so her mother-in-law, and they've been sending all of the anti-cockroach bugs, traps, sprays.
Maybe we can get like a little tent. To put Ben
seriously,
in at night, just a little tent.
For real.
Bed.
So yeah, it's
hilarious.
There's been plenty of times that I've been able to give my wife a hard time about like it's just a spider, so she's loving that right now. Being on the other side of that, being able to text me from Wisconsin where there's no bugs right now, and being like, hey, how's your new roommate? So.
I hope nobody in your office is listening, because I'm sure pranks are about to start happening for the rest of the season with the bugs. All right, final question of the hat trick. What person would you trade places with for a day, and it could be somebody dead or alive?
So this is anybody?
Anybody you could trade places with just for a day, experience their life.
Ooh, that is a fantastic question.
Hat trick never fails.
I'm going to go Elliot Freedman.
Interesting. Of all the people, well, he is a writer. So, I mean, your face just went, what?
No, I love
There's a
Elliot.
reason. I was
He
gonna say
still texts me
Does he?
every Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Elliot Freedman.
I've been doing it for like 15 years now.
That's
amazing.
incredible.
Well, that tells us the kind of person he is.
Well, it's
why
like-
Elliot Freedman? Just
So, like when you're growing up, we talked about some of my favorite hockey players growing up. You know, first, like Elliot Freedman is the kind of guy that when I was an 18-year-old, when I wanted to be in journalism, I wanted to be Elliot Freedman.
Got it.
Like he was my professional hockey player. As in, like that's who you wanted. That's what the level you want to reach. And you know, I've had my tweet notifications on for him for the last 10 years, and he's just such a pro at what he does, and his ability to not only be so good on TV and in the podcast, the 32 Thoughts, but the fact that he does that and then turns around and writes such compelling pieces, like as a journalist, that's the level that you want to reach. And, you know, I'm somebody that I'm always trying to get better. You know, a couple years ago, I think I sent him a DM and he didn't respond. I asked him for some advice. So we'll have to talk about that eventually when he comes to visit Tampa Bay.
You got better hair than him, that's for sure.
All right, let's go.
Yeah,
Let's go. But no,
You got
he's
that going for you.
He's such a pro's pro, and he's somebody that even just watching on TV and some of his writing, you know, you're constantly trying to learn, and I think he's so good at what he does, and it's the level you want to reach. So
absolutely.
So being in Wisconsin, would you have got Hockey Night in Canada? Like was that your thing? I know like sometimes some of the northern states pick up Hockey Night in Canada a lot.
So the nice thing about that is because we're in Wisconsin, you know, the Minnesota Wild and the Blackhawks are right there, so we're actually blacked out TV wise for both of them.
Wow.
So, like, you know, growing up, the Wild were the close one, but then you got the Packers-Vikings thing, so you're like, I don't know if I want to cross that line,
Right.
you know? And then I went and married a Minnesota girl, so, you know, there that goes. But the nice part about that was every other team you could watch anytime, you know, and especially these last couple of years with all the TV deals changing.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of nights watching Oilers games starting at 10 p.m., you know, and I'm up until 1:30, 2 in the morning watching the games. And it makes
Principe. Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. The pun master. Absolute legend for that. But it's just it was a lot of late nights sitting there watching, and it helps when you're watching Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
Heard that.
But yeah, it was cool because you got to watch every game, and it's kind of just how it was. That's what I did on my late nights. So
well, we're excited. The Wisconsin boy is now here in Tampa Bay, and Ben, we thank you so much for taking the time.
Cows.
Yeah, watch your cows. You know,
tipping them over. Or something.
seriously.
But yeah, you can catch all of his work. Please follow him on X, Twitter, whatever you may call it these days, because he does bring compelling Lightning stuff to you every single day. And we appreciate you taking the time, Ben, and appreciate our friends at High Life for powering another awesome episode of the Bolts Block Party, and we will see you guys next week. Go Bolts.